You ever feel it in your gut, that sense that what you're watching isn't just football, it's history? That a single night can shatter a franchise's identity right in front of your eyes? That's what happened in Cleveland. This wasn't just a loss. This wasn't just another line on the schedule. What unfolded in First Energy Stadium was chaos, betrayal, and a quarterback controversy that now feels less like a debate and more like a full-blown civil war. And at the center of it all, Kevin Stefanski, Jimmy Haslam, and one name echoing louder than all the rest, Shedeur Sanders. The Browns' season opener spiraled into outright bedlam, with head coach Kevin Stefanski standing dead center in the storm after Cleveland's gut-wrenching 17-6 collapse against the Cincinnati Bengals. According to multiple insiders, team owner Jimmy Haslam confronted Stefanski in the locker room, not in private, not behind closed doors, but right there in front of stunned players and staff, publicly ripping into him over one decision: benching rookie quarterback Shedeur Sanders. Now, let me tell you, this wasn't your standard case of an angry owner blowing off steam. This wasn't frustration over a few bad play calls. What unfolded inside that stadium represented something much bigger. Authority crumbled. Credibility evaporated. The whole foundation of the franchise cracked in real time. And you could feel it building even before the final whistle. Fourth quarter, Browns down by a single point. The offense sputtering. The crowd restless. And then it began, chants so loud the cameras could barely drown them out. "We want Shedeur. We want Shedeur." It thundered from every corner of the stadium. Fans begging for the rookie phenom who had owned training camp. But Stefanski dug in, stuck with the veteran Joe Flacco. And the result? Predictable. A stalled final drive. A turnover on downs. Joe Burrow kneeling it out with ice in his veins. Bengals walk away winners. Browns walk off defeated. But the real chaos, that detonated afterward. Haslam didn't even wait for the clock to hit zero. Witnesses say he stormed out of his luxury suite early, rage boiling over, security scrambling to clear the tunnels. Executives trailing behind him looked like they were walking into a funeral. By the time he reached the locker room, his face told the whole story. Cold, calculated fury. The scene inside, surreal. Players mid-undress, coaches staring at the floor, equipment guys vanishing into corners. And then Haslam points right at Shedeur Sanders and unloads. "That's our franchise quarterback, sitting there, watching us lose." Stefanski tries to explain himself, calmly talking, game management. Haslam cuts him off cold. "Game management? You managed us into another defeat." Then comes the table slam, a thunderclap that echoed through the room. And with that, he storms out, leaving silence in his wake. The fallout was immediate. Veterans whispering about lost leadership. Receivers walking over to Sanders, patting his shoulder pads. Linemen huddling, debating what this meant for their future. Defensive stars muttering that all their effort had been wasted. One veteran finally spoke the truth. "Everybody here knows he's ready. We saw it all camp. We needed him tonight, and we didn't get him." Meanwhile, Flacco's stat line told the whole story. 18 completions on 29 attempts. 167 yards, no touchdowns. One interception. Mediocrity in its purest form. Missed third downs. Red zone failures. No presence in the pocket. Flacco reportedly apologized afterward, but Stefanski's loyalty to him had already deepened the fracture. And then there was Shedeur Sanders, helmet still on, motionless at his locker, eyes locked on the floor, saying nothing. But those close to him, they'll tell you he's furious. Quietly furious. Patient but simmering. This kid had outworked everyone in the building. First to arrive, last to leave. Film sessions past midnight. Extra reps with receivers. Coaches whispering his pre-snap reads were sharper than Flacco's. And yet, he never touched the field. Outside the stadium, the anger spilled into the streets. Fans gathered at the gates with signs demanding Stefanski's firing and Sanders' ascension. Videos of the chants went viral within hours. Local news interrupted coverage to report on protests. One fan chained himself to the stadium fence before being dragged away by security. Online, hashtags like #StartShedeur exploded across platforms. TikTok reactions. Reddit threads breaking down every detail of Haslam's outburst. Twitter timelines on fire. And then came the ripple effects inside the organization. Assistant coaches suddenly getting conflicting orders. One day Sanders runs with the first team, the next day Flacco's back in. Practices derailed. Tuesday's session collapsed when Stefanski yanked Sanders mid-reps to reinstall Flacco. 17 minutes wasted. Veterans openly frustrated. Coaches whispering privately about their preference for Sanders, while towing the public line of loyalty to Stefanski. This isn't a quarterback controversy anymore. This is an identity crisis. And the damage? It's bleeding into every corner of the franchise. Ticket sales already slipping. Merchandise with Sanders' name outselling everyone else combined. Corporate sponsors voicing unease. Broadcast partners dreading empty ratings if Sanders remains benched. Even Haslam's empire beyond football feels the tremors. Every week Sanders sits, millions in value evaporate. The media isn't helping. Beat reporters picking sides, columns turning hostile, even death threats flying. Press conferences collapsing into verbal firefights. Stefanski's midweek availability cut off after just 4 minutes. Inside the locker room, fractures deepen. Offensive coordinator Alex Van Pelt trapped between loyalty to Stefanski and recognition of Sanders' talent. Position coaches torn between honesty and survival. The situation is combustible. Defensive veterans grumbling. Offensive weapons frustrated. And in the middle of it all, Shedeur Sanders, still silent, still waiting. His camp maneuvering carefully behind the scenes. Reps reportedly documenting everything, preseason numbers, practice analytics, testimonials from teammates. Even video evidence contrasting Flacco's limitations with Sanders' explosiveness. And let's not ignore the history. Cleveland's quarterback graveyard is legendary, a jersey of discarded names that's become a national punchline. But Sanders isn't another project. He's not a developmental gamble. He's the real deal. A franchise cornerstone left rotting on the sideline while the team eats itself alive. Now the schedule only tightens the noose. Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Kansas City. Each week Sanders doesn't start, the margin for error shrinks. Criticism grows louder. Playoff hopes drift closer to the grave. So here's where we stand. The Browns are no longer just playing football. They're fighting for their very identity. Ownership versus coaching. Veterans versus rookies. Fans versus management, and all of it circling around one young quarterback whose time feels inevitable. And the only question left is this: how much longer can they keep Shedeur Sanders on that bench before the entire franchise finally explodes? By October, you could already feel it slipping away. Hopes, dreams, expectations, dust in the wind. And behind the scenes, the panic button was being hovered over. Ownership wasn't just thinking about contingency plans, they were accelerating them. Shortlists were being compiled. Coordinators whispered about as possible interim replacements. The machinery of transition was quietly cranking into motion. And Jimmy Haslam? He wanted action yesterday. Immediate, swift, brutal. But his advisors begged him to think about optics, to not look like a franchise in full meltdown. But let's be real. The optics were already a disaster. Through all of this chaos, one figure stood out: Shedeur Sanders. This kid was different. While the world around him spiraled, he doubled down: more film study, grueling conditioning sessions, voluntary throwing reps with his receivers. Veterans in that locker room couldn't believe what they were seeing. They weren't looking at a rookie, they were looking at a professional who carried himself like he'd been in this league for years. His maturity wasn't just rare, it was undeniable. And it kept reinforcing one truth everyone felt but few dared to say out loud: Shedeur Sanders was ready. Right now. Meanwhile, the financial side told an even uglier story. Joe Flacco's contract? Dead money. A sunk cost. Sanders' rookie deal? Pure flexibility, a golden ticket for roster building. But forget money. This was about optics, about wins, about saving a season circling the drain. Every game Sanders sat while the team bled out was malpractice. Fans weren't renewing tickets. Suites sat empty. Concessions tanked. And the league-wide perception? Cleveland wasn't climbing out of dysfunction. They were sinking deeper into it. Agents told their clients, don't touch the Browns. Free agents turned away. This wasn't a destination franchise. It was becoming a cautionary tale. And then came the health risk no one could ignore. Flacco, brittle, aging behind a porous offensive line, taking hits that could end more than just a drive. Sanders' mobility, his athleticism, at least he had a fighting chance. But Kevin Stefanski clung to tradition. Experience over adaptation. Stubbornness over innovation. Even as medical staff whispered warnings, Stefanski dug in. Wednesday's practice put gasoline on the fire. Haslam, unexpectedly present, stood on the sideline as Shedeur Sanders went 17 straight completions in drills. 17. Haslam clapped, nodded, visibly impressed. Stefanski? Jaw tight. Stone-faced. The disconnect couldn't have been more obvious. Ownership saw the future. Coaching refused to acknowledge it. And while the football side froze, even the marketing wing crumbled. Campaigns built around Sanders sat idle. Social teams weren't allowed to spotlight him. Merchandise lines stalled. Broadcast partners simmered. Everyone knew Sanders was the future, yet the franchise was too broken to seize it. Inside the locker room, desperation was boiling. The Veteran Leadership Council held emergency talks. Captains whispered about demanding change themselves. Some even considered trade requests if this stalemate didn't end. The pressure cooker was about to blow. And then came Thursday, the most damning blow yet. Leaked emails between Haslam and minority owners. Not a shred of confidence left in Stefanski. Publicly, they gave support. Privately, they wanted him gone. By the time Stefanski stormed out of a press conference after just 2 minutes, his fate was already sealed in whispers. Players started rebelling online. Amari Cooper dropping cryptic Instagram clips. Nick Chubb liking tweets backing Sanders. David Njoku tossing up TikToks with not-so-subtle messages. A digital rebellion. The locker room wasn't hiding anymore. By Friday, the situation spiraled. Reports flew that Stefanski had even submitted his resignation, then pulled it back after a heated meeting with Andrew Berry. But at that point, even Berry himself looked compromised. His credibility shattered. What was once a quarterback controversy had become a full-blown organizational collapse. And as Baltimore loomed on the schedule, the chaos only deepened. Coaches didn't know who to prep. Players didn't know what scheme to expect. Word even leaked that Baltimore's defensive coordinator literally laughed when he heard about Cleveland's quarterback turmoil. That's how bad it was. The dysfunction itself was giving the Ravens a strategic edge before kickoff. Saturday's closed practice made it worse. Unusual secrecy. Media locked out. And when the leaks came, they painted a damning picture. Shedeur Sanders shined flawless in the red zone, 0 turnovers, bombs connecting downfield. Flacco, sputtering, frustrated, body language defeated, coaches exchanging grim looks. Everyone knew the truth, even if they wouldn't say it out loud. Sanders was the guy. But the business side wasn't waiting. Corporate partners were holding emergency meetings. Some froze activations. Others scoured contracts for exit clauses. Haslam's credibility was tanking, not just in football, but across his empire. Sunday dawned, and the atmosphere was electric. Pre-game shows opened with one storyline: Cleveland's quarterback disaster. Protesters gathered outside the stadium. Fans braced for the decision. And then, 2 hours before kickoff, Stefanski dropped the bombshell. Joe Flacco would start. Shedeur Sanders? Inactive. The reaction was nuclear. Haslam reportedly smashed a TV in his luxury suite before storming out. Executives scrambled. Players stunned. Some flat-out refused pre-game interviews. The game itself, a nightmare. Ravens 27, Browns 10. Flacco lifeless. The offense booed off the field drive after drive. Fans left early. Faces of disgust. By the time the final whistle blew, the Browns weren't just beaten, they were humiliated. And in the post-game locker room, pandemonium. Haslam barged in, confronted Stefanski directly. 47 seconds of chaos. And then the head coach left the facility. Done. By Monday morning, it was only a matter of time. Stefanski's tenure was measured in hours. Andrew Berry's job was hanging by a thread. Assistants started quietly shopping their resumes. The Browns had officially become a national punchline. But here's the thing. Through all of it, Shedeur Sanders never flinched. He stood in front of cameras, answered questions, supported his teammates, hid his frustration, and showed a level of maturity that's unheard of for his age. He carried himself like the franchise quarterback he already is. And finally, the inevitable happened. Stefanski was out. Alex Van Pelt promoted to interim. Shedeur Sanders officially named the starter. Relief washed over the building. Players rallied. Energy surged. Sanders took command of the huddle like he'd been waiting his whole life for this. And when he spoke to the media, it was nothing but gratitude, respect, and focus. No bitterness. No shots fired. Just pure professionalism. For the first time in months, optimism flickered in Cleveland. Because yes, the Browns stand on the edge of ruin. But with Shedeur Sanders stepping into the spotlight, they also stand on the threshold of resurrection. And trust me, this is just the beginning.